Cicero, De Finibus Bonorum et Malorum, Book 3, Episode 1. Voluptatem quidem, brute, si ipsa pro se loquatur nec tam pertinaces habeat patronos, concessuram arbitror, convictam superiore, libro dignitati. In this important philosophical work, Cicero is dealing with the opinions of the three different schools on the limits of good and evil. The schools are the academics, the Epicureans, and the Stoics. Pleasure, he says, voluptatem, indeed or in fact. Now pleasure, Brutus. Voluptatem is feminine, singular, and accusative. It is accusative because it is the subject of oratio obliqua, indirect statement. Brute, masculine, singular, and vocative because it's addressed to him. Now really, pleasure, O Brutus, si loquatur nec habeat. This is the si clause, the protasis. The apodosis has as its verb arbitror. Arbitror introduces the oratio obliqua, the indirect statement, of which voluptatem, as I have said, is the subject. Voluptatem is the subject. The infinitive is esse, although it is merely implicit here, it's not stated. And concessuram is the predicate of voluptatem. That's why they are both feminine, singular, accusative. If she herself, meaning pleasure, ipsa, the pronoun, refers to voluptatem, that's its antecedent. If she herself, meaning pleasure, on behalf of herself, pro se, spoke, if pleasure could speak for herself, nec, and did not, nor, we should say, nor had, habeat, tam pertinaces patronos. So there are two verbs then of which ipsa is the subject. The first is loquatur, and the second is habeat. They are both present subjunctives, third singular, present subjunctives in this conditional. If she spoke for herself, nor possessed such stubborn or persevering supporters, patronos, pertinaces and patronos are both masculine plural and accusative as the object of habeat. If that should be the case, I think, I judge. Arbitror is the verb of the apodosis, thus it is the main verb of the sentence. I think that pleasure, voluptatem, would yield, concessuram esse. Concessuram is a future active participle from the third conjugation verb concedo, concedere, which means to give way or to yield. I think that she, that is pleasure, would yield, completely overwhelmed or conquered, convictam, by the previous book, superiore and libro. So superiore and libro are masculine singular, and ablative of instrument. So convictam, passive, superiore libro, ablative of instrument. Now what about dignitati? Dignitati is a feminine singular and dative from the third declension noun. It's an abstract. Dignitas, dignitatis, which means moral worth or moral value. So this dative is an indirect object with concessuram. Pleasure would yield, concessuram esse, to moral worth. And she would yield because she has been conquered, convictam, by the previous book, Superiore Libro. This is a reference to Book 2 of this same work, in which Cicero refutes, through the person of a spokesman, he refutes the Epicurean version of the moral life, which is based on pleasure. The style of this opening sentence is quite remarkable. Notice especially the hyperbaton, voluptatem, and dignitati. These words have a relation via concessuram, but they are dramatically separated. This is the figure of speech known as hyperbaton, wherein you separate things that normally belong together. Voluptatem is the first word in the sentence. Dignitati, its opposite, is the last word. Cicero is using word order, as he always does, to make his point. I have found it is very helpful when trying to understand a sentence like this, whose word order is so different from English, to rephrase it. This is called an annotatio. To rephrase it in the simplest form possible. So this is what it would be. Arbitror voluptatem, I think that pleasure, esse, this is implicit, concessuram, I think that pleasure will yield. Everything else is modification. This si clause, si through patronos, is a kind of modification with the two subjunctive verbs, habeat and loquatur. And then we have this modification, convictam, and this, etc.